another example of like the bar getting lower for attackers, and it just makes it the defender's job. That's why I'm hopeful that as cybersecurity vendors get to realize their vision for AI for the blue side, that maybe it will give us an opportunity to keep up with the bad guys. Although I still contend that's further out than Palo Alto believes.
And here you are saying you're not sure Palo's going to succeed, but the bad guys, you're all about them succeeding. What makes you think that the bad guys are better at AI than the good guys?
I just think the bad guys are better at taking advantage of technical debt than we are of retiring technical debt.
Ooh, that could be the quote of the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Cyber Y Pod, where security and snarky wit collide. TCW is your go-to auditory and visual feast summarizing the captivating world of cybersecurity. On today's pod, we bring you monthly roundtable rendezvous where humor meets hacker culture. We delve into the latest in cybersecurity news, trends, and mishaps, offering up a dish best served cold with a side of snark. I have a killer team with me here today. So let me kick off this very first episode of the Cyber Y podcast by introducing our crack team of analysts. First and foremost, joining me today, we have Rick Holland. Rick is an eagle eye for threat intelligence, nation state actors, and breach details. Rick dissects cyber threats with the precision of a seasoned surgeon, offering up a masterclass in digital defense. You like this, Rick, don't you? Residing in Texas, Rick is an expert in all things barbecue and threats. Please welcome Rick Holland. Rick.
I am glad to be here. Good to be with y'all.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have my partner in crime from another show, a brother from another mother. Adrian is our resident tech wizard, bringing a wealth of knowledge on everything from network security to the ethical quandaries of hacking, ensuring our discussions are as deep as they are wide. When asked what his areas of expertise are, he replied, anger, consternation, rants, and get the hell off my lawn. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adrian Sanabria to the show.
I'm just famously grumpy.
He is. That's fantastic. And last but not least, we have Katie at Teitler-Santullo. She is the CyberWise strategic savant. She navigates the complex web of cybersecurity, vendor marketing, policies, practices, human impacts, market analysis, and illuminates the path for business and individuals alike. Katie has a passion for chocolate, is the kindest member of the CyberY team by far, and generally finds herself rolling her eyes at the stupidity of the rest of the crew. Please welcome our ray of sunshine in a dark studio, Katie.
Yay. Thank you. I have literally never been called a ray of sunshine before, so I am going to freeze this moment in time.
As you should, Katie. You are. I mean, just look at the crowd you're in. You are definitely the ray of sunshine in this moment. And since I couldn't write my own version of an introduction for myself, I went to ChatGPT. And according to ChatGPT, I am Tyler Shields. My insights are the stuff of legend. And if cybersecurity had a Hall of Fame, my avatar would be right at the entrance. I swear to God, this came straight off of ChatGPT.
This is hallucinations. We are seeing hallucinations at work.
What were the prompts you used?
Yeah, I just said, who is Tyler Shields? But listen, he focuses on cyber business metrics, cyber investing and markets, application security, thinning hair, and massive snark. Nice. Myself, your moderator for today's show, Tyler Shields. Pleasure to see you all. Pleasure to meet you all. And welcome to the very first issue of the Cyber Y podcast. So thank you all for being here. Just by way of introduction, the Cyber Y is a weekly newsletter, and now it's turning up almost weekly deep thought analyst group of the four of us who write content on about a weekly basis over there. So pop on over to thecyberY.com, and you can get all of our rants and thoughts and snark and wit and fun. And to open today's show, I would really like to dive straight into what feels like it is the most interesting drama, tea, whatever we want to call it. And that is Palo Alto announcing earnings last week, pre-announcing a decrease in the market, in their expectations on revenue, in their expectations on booking, as they go ahead and actually attempt to kind of I think they use the word platformize or platformarize, something like that, the business. Essentially, the strategy that Nikesh Arora, the CEO of Palo Alto, is beginning to roll out is a strategy where he's attempting to roll together 15 plus products that they've bought over the last 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it is. Roll these products together and actually create a one ring to rule them. And for those of you that watch other podcasts that I'm on, I very firmly believe in this one ring to rule them. What's interesting is that when they pre-announced the setback a little bit in earnings for the year, the market dumped about 20%, and that set off a firestorm of cybersecurity pundits all commenting on Palo Alto's effectiveness. Will they be able to set this record straight? Will they be able to hit this goal that that Nikesh is actually talking about? And so I wrote a little piece on it in response to another piece that was written by Richard Steinen, who's a fairly well-known former analyst as well. And he seems to think that it will be impossible to actually create a platform, a single ring to rule them platform. And he thinks that point solutions will prevail forever. I, on the other hand, believe that the strategy that Nikesh is pulling together is going to be the better long-term strategy from an expectation standpoint. I think he's attempting to pay down some technical debt, actually get the 15 to 20, whatever it is, acquisitions rolled together, collect and unify the largest cybersecurity data set on the planet, which he is the only company, Palo is the only company that has that broad of a data set. And in his words, activate their AI leadership strategy. So I would love, Adrian, if you could kind of give me a little of opinion on what your thoughts are on this particular move by Nikesh and Palo Alto.
I think it's kind of a dumb argument. Like everybody's just going to extremes on either end of it. One side is saying platform for everything. The other side is saying there'll never be a platform for everything. Of course there won't. There's tons of niches in security. As much tech, physical, digital, everything. Security touches anything where there's risk almost these days. More and more CISOs are telling me that they're now responsible for fraud in their organizations. So of course you're not going to have a platform that covers everything, but are you going to have smaller platforms that cover areas where there's a lot of overlap and it makes sense? The example I like to use is, these days, back when Cylance and CrowdStrike were new, you might have a next-gen AV and an EPP platform, but not anymore. Right? Like those are the same thing. And it's probably also doing EDR, XDR. You're probably going to get that all from the same vendor. You're not going to go to different vendors for very similar things.
So what are you thinking, Adrian? Let me ask you this. Are we coming down to maybe 3 or 4 key platforms that end up being rolled together? And so you'll get maybe 3 and you're done instead of the 50 plus tools that have to be deployed for a CISO to be secure today?
Absolutely. I think a point only, a best of breed only approach is insane. The amount of overhead you're going to have, most point products are going to get acquired anyway. 95% plus of point products are on that acquisition exit path. And I hear people almost every day say, upset when their favorite tool gets acquired. I got to go look for something new because he's got, Broadcom's going to ruin it, or Palo Alto's going to ruin it, or somebody's going to ruin it,
But historically, so Richard had a post that said historically these companies do ruin it. That's exactly what they do when they make acquisitions and they try to roll together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 products. The historic result is garbage, right? You have IBM, you have Symantec, you have Broadcom, you have these companies that over the years have done these acquisitions. And the running joke has always been, IBM is where good, or Symantec is where good companies go to die. So in that respect, I think he's right from a historical sense. But I also think that in today's world of a new paradigm of computing, AI overlays, where data and the quantity of data that you collect is the most important factor to the success of your ability to detect attacks, a play where you roll up more data can only be successful in the long term. So it's interesting because Richard put out a commentary that says, it's very dinosaur-esque and says essentially that this is doomed for failure. It'll never happen. And then I put out a counterpoint and a bunch of other folks put out counterpoints and pro points and all those kinds of things. And then Nikesh actually chimed in, put his own post on LinkedIn. I think it was just this morning or yesterday, essentially giving his version of the story and why he thinks it's going to work strategically, which I totally believe in. And then our friend Richard, in his response, actually, he went right up there and just pretty much slapped Nikesh in the face and said, "Your heart's in the right place." This is a quote. "Your heart's in the right place, but your grasp of how the industry works is a fantasy." Now, I'm going to rewind to another post that I've done in the past called the BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal of Palo Alto Networks. So last December of 2022, October 2022, Nikesh was at Palo Alto was at $50 billion of market cap. And Nikesh went on record saying he would be the first $100 billion market cap cybersecurity company in existence. And literally everybody was like, "That is insane. You're nuts. That's never going to happen." He got there in 14 months. I don't discount a guy that got there that can go from 50 billion in market cap to 100 billion in market cap in 2023 in an era where cybersecurity products are sliding and failing and struggling and laying off. He went to 100 billion and hit that big, hairy, audacious goal. But apparently he doesn't have, his industry understanding is a fantasy. So sorry, Richard, I definitely got to call you out on that one. And then Nikesh was extremely classy in his response and just basically said, "Hey, let me know when you want to see the dashboards. It works. I'll show it to you." And so, definitely very interesting in there. Have you been following this at all, Rick? Have you been following kind of the discussion on this?
Well, just one thing. That is a good example of how to do industry analyst relations, because a lot of folks would have an analyst, and of course, Richard's an independent analyst, plays one on TV now, would go scorched earth on that person, which is never going to result in good things. So I think that's a classy response that a lot of founders should follow.
It is funny you say that. I agree totally. And you got to be careful, because if you read the entire thread, which it's in our show notes, so Sean, our super producer, will make sure that we bring up a link to this, and we bring up the ability for you guys to actually get there. But he does have more than one post. Nikesh does have more than one post in there. So I think there might have been a little need for some AR work here. They were all friendly and very well thought out, and were not negative. However, I would have much rather have seen no, or maybe the one post at best in this scenario. But you really don't want to defend a strategic decision like this. You want to say, "Hey, this is the strategy. It's going to work. See you later. You guys can fight it if you want. We're going to win." So any other thoughts there, Rick?
Only thought I would have is just bring in the practitioner perspective. I talk to, in my role as kind of a field CISO, really focused on customers in my day job. I talk to lots of security directors. My worldview is more SOC side versus other part like AppSec for you. But I can definitely say unequivocally, CISOs are reconciling their portfolios. They do want to consolidate, but they shouldn't be consolidating for the sake of consolidation. Like, should be some actual outcomes that we're looking for. And I think a lot of times we get focused on integrations and market cap and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it should be like, what are you solving for the CISO and her team or his team that's out there? So I don't think we should lose sight of that, is that we need to be making their lives easier. But definitely reconciliation is there. My joke from an analyst day was expense in depth. Like, people just buy more stuff over and over versus defense in depth. And I'd like to see consolidation, but just for the record, I don't believe there'll ever be one platform to rule them all. Too many disparate areas of cybersecurity. I kind of would fall into the Adrian camp, where you'll have enclaves of unification.
Yeah, I just, something else I want to throw out there is, back from my pen testing days, I did notice that the companies that were hardest to get into had fewer vendors. And the vendors they did have tended to be, now I was mostly hitting a certain part of the market. So I was hitting mid-sized market where they didn't have a huge team to take care of a whole bunch of products anyway. But they would have one platform, and they would use like 95, 99% of the features in that platform. Versus some of these organizations you see where they're just constantly onboarding, doing POCs. There's just a constant cycle of stuff coming in and coming out of the organization. There's just more stability. There's less time spent looking for products and onboarding products and offboarding products, and more time actually using them. So I feel like the longer, you have that product in there, the more stable it's going to be, the more you're going to realize, how to configure things correctly, which is something I constantly see in organizations, larger organizations with, say 4 or 5 products per headcount in the security team. Everything's misconfigured. Nothing's optimized. They just don't have the time.
Go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, in my last pure play analyst role, one of the things that we did, and this was absolutely crazy, is we were called in to do a manual asset inventory, a tools inventory for major, like Fortune 100 companies all the time. So we were literally 2 people coming in to interview cybersecurity teams, 2 external people with very little tribal knowledge of the organization coming in and saying, hey, what tools do you use? Hey, what tools are you using? And in the last one we did, there were 34 business units. We had to interview 34. Yes, Rick, I just saw those eyebrows raised. 34 different business units. And we had hour-long calls with all of them and said, what are you using? What are you using? What are you using? And in every case, it would start out with them listing 4, 5, 8, 10 tools. And in every case, 100% of the time, we'd say, that reminds me of this. Other teams like yours are using X. 100% of the time, they'd be like, oh, yeah. And that didn't happen for one product. It happened for between like 5 and 8 different products that they forgot about. And the reason I'm thinking of this is because a lot of the time, those were POCs. They were demoing new products and they had they weren't considering them part of their inventory because they weren't fully deployed. But that doesn't mean they weren't causing problems. So if you do have at least a little more consolidation, and I agree with Rick because I hear it all the time when I'm talking to end users too, like, oh my God, we are so tired of trying to integrate this tool with that tool with whatever tool. If you have fewer of those vendors, it's easier from an end user point of view. And it's just, I agree that I don't think there's going to be one platform to rule them all, but there will be 4 or 5 bigger platforms because you can't have one anyway.
That's 3 against Tyler. That's 3 against Tyler, by the way. I'm just keeping score.
And eventually it's going to be the US government against Tyler, right? Like there is a monopoly issue that could potentially come up. If there is a Palo or a Microsoft that says we're going to buy everything and we're going to be the only one on the market, somebody. Well,
they haven't gone after E5 yet, though, Katie. Like, I wonder when that might happen because the E5, certainly with the way that the administration has done some of the antitrust stuff, you could have a case to go after Microsoft there. In fact, some of the things that they've gone after, E5 might be a better, or software bundling in general might be a better target for that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's
so. Let me jump on that, actually, Rick, and bring up another point that I want to ask y'all if you think this is going to work. Part of the strategic play and the reason why Palo Alto has guided down is that they expect to actually they are kicking off. I think I saw it come out today or yesterday in actual press announcement. They're going to allow customers a period of time, 6 months, a year, of free Palo services to get essentially to purchase the market, to buy the market as they get rid of the other vendors that they're consolidating up into the Palo singular platform. And I think they're calling it the Cortex AI platform. So, for example, if you're using, I don't even know what vendor comes to mind, but a vendor for endpoint, and they want to roll you over, they'll say, hey, you got 6 months left in your contract or a year left in your contract. We'll give you a year free of Cortex AI and Palo. And you roll that over, and then when that's done, you can actually just come on full time and start paying us. So that's actually one of the core reasons why they guided down. This is essentially a 2024 version of, hey, I'm a startup who just got $500 million of investment to go blitz and buy the market. This is their version of that. They're using their own capital, their own cash to essentially attempt to buy the market. Do you guys think that this is actually going to be successful in that way?
Yeah. I do, because look at
in other markets.
Yeah, I mean, look at all of the consumerization markets that have made their way into businesses. Why did that happen? because they targeted human beings. They targeted our emotions. They targeted ease of use, which is, cybersecurity friction use case 101. They targeted people and the way people like to work and the way people like to go about their day. And so they're just going to slide right on into that. They're going to Netflix the hell out of us.
They're going to Netflix the hell out of it. That's the term of the day. Adrian, do you think it's going to actually work? Do you think by giving away free products for the next year and taking a revenue and bookings hit now, that they're going to win in 2 years? Or I've heard even by 2030 they're going to be 2 to 3x in size what they are today. Do you think that's a reasonable expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I think security is going to continue to grow, and there are just a lot of, all they need are working products to pull this off. There are a lot of bad products in the security space. They're not going to need best of breed. They're not going to need the best products. As long as they work and they can pull this off, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's totally possible.
All right. Well, we're gonna see. So Nikesh himself chimed in that thread with Richard. And made a few key points that I want to bring up before we wrap up this topic. In his response, he said the following: "We don't have the luxury of time. As attackers start with AI, we're going to be behind the curve." So I think it's a very valid point that if you're going to create an AI-backed platform, you have to do it now and you have to blitz and buy the market, or we're going to be so far behind attackers that we won't be able to catch up. So that's point one. Point two he brought up is we can't achieve consistent real-time remediation with 50-point solutions. And he's right, because you spend so much time passing data back and forth between point solutions, having workflows, doing things by hand, that you never can do anything in real time. It'll never happen. And AI and big data is the driver for real time. And now that we're in this new era, real time becomes possible. So there has to be a single platform to fix this problem. He also correctly identifies the issues with the point solution problem: complexity. You're significantly lowering complexity by going to a singular solution and not having to have all these interconnected integrations and workflows. And the primary outcome of a single platform solution, platformatization as he called it, is faster remediation. And when we're in a situation where we don't have the luxury of time, this is the only solution worth playing. And essentially his argument is that customers will demand this. As they build it, customers will demand it. And so I'm getting behind it. I vote it'll win. I think we should give me thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you all think? Is this going to win or not? I'm going to hold you to it. And then when we do next February's discussion, we're going to go back and we're going to look and see how y'all voted. That's one thumbs up from Adrian. Sideways. Oh, you figures. Rick says sideways. He's non-committal. Katie, up or down? Are they going to win?
I'm betting on Palo. I mean, I agree that there can't be one mega platform to rule them all, but I do think if anybody can tackle this approach and be a super platform, it's Palo.
Fantastic. Well, that's our opening topic. I found that to be for me, that was the hottest topic of the last couple of weeks. I want to transition now to our second topic of the day. This one, our own analyst, Rick Holland, has submitted, so we're going to let him lead it. But give me the TLDR on what's going on with MS, with Microsoft, OpenAI, China, Iran, North Korea, Russia. What's going on there? What's the news coming out of these foreign countries, and what is the real impact to the U.S.?
Yeah, there was two things that I wanted to kind of dig into around AI. One is just kind of observation from what I'm seeing from customer base, and then kind of what the actors are doing. Because I'm talking to security buyers every week, every day. And of course, people are always comparing notes. Like, what are you doing in your own AI program? Like, are we straight out block? We're still in the infancy of this. Just a year into it now. I have a lot of folks that are just straight up blocking it altogether, not letting their employees use it. Others that have rolled their own versions of AI and things along those lines. But I'd say from a Defender perspective, we're very much in the let's set up the governance. Let's do the discovery. Let's try to understand, like you should with any new tech and emerging tech, is understand that. But where invariably the conversations go to that I'm having will be like, well, what are the threat actors? What are the threat actors doing? And I was thinking back to a talk that some former colleagues, Forrester, Jeff and Ali, did at the Forrester SNR Summit in November, and they said that they didn't think adversaries, I may be mischaracterizing a little bit, but gist of it is like adversaries don't need to use AI. Everything's working for them fine right now. And I agree with part of that sentiment, but adversaries want to be efficient and they want to maximize the amount of work that they can do. So if they can use AI to work smarter, faster, then they're going to do it 100%. We're not at the AI versus AI, blue team versus red team fighting off threat actors yet. So that's the high level. I was going to dig into a couple stories, but I was going to see if anybody else wanted to add any color on what you're seeing, questions that you're having, and then I can break down a couple articles that have come up on this topic.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, just figuring out like when we say, AI could be a threat or a risk, there's so much of it. I think every app I'm using right now has AI embedded into it already at some point. If I hit Windows key C right now, Copilot pops out from the right hand of my desktop on my Windows machine here. My browser has AI built into it. Notion has AI built into it. Now Slack has AI built into it. I've got AI filtering my voice so that if I type on the keyboard, you're not going to hear me typing on keys, or if I click on my mouse, you're not going to hear that. So it's got to be categorized and prioritized, obviously stuff that you can just put plain text, paste, stuff into, or upload documents, spreadsheets and stuff into. I would think you would prioritize over other things, but there's just so much happening all at once. Like everybody must feel overwhelmed on the defender side.
Just wait till RSA Expo floor, right?
Well, last year it was all AI. Like that was all anybody was talking about already. Like that was the main conversation, and that was just less than 6 months from ChatGPT being released, right?
I'm curious about the actual data, and of course, I'm bringing this up, and I'll bring up my data conversation later too. But when you say Jeff and Ali said the adversaries don't need AI. I mean, I think there's probably a valid point on that because low-hanging fruit is always their go-to. And right now there's just so much that's so easy. But I'd love to get some data on what's actually happening, because you do see this in vendor marketing materials, right? You do see, oh my God, the adversaries are targeting your AI. So there's a lot of talk about it. What are the numbers? Does anybody have any numbers on that?
So it's super interesting to me. There's two versions of AI security to me. There's the security of AI, meaning security of the LLMs themselves, the inputs, the outputs, the training materials, can we convince the AI to hallucinate or do things like that? And then there's using AI to conduct security, which is a totally different viewpoint. So when we flip that dynamic on its head and we talk about nation state attackers, what specifically do they plan to do? Do they plan to create complete AI from the ground up that targets and attacks? Or is it, hey, let's just augment our current techniques that are resulting in financial gain, are resulting in political gain, whatever the components are, with AI to make them slightly smarter? So maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of like what's actually happening on the ground in those scenarios.
Yeah.
There's probably three examples that I want to bring up. One is OpenAI and Mystic, Microsoft's threat intelligence shop, did some research on what they were actually seeing nation states. This was on nation states. We put it in one of the stories, week before, I can't remember which week it was, but this made it into the weekly, what we're reading this month. But essentially Microsoft and OpenAI had seen China, North Korea, and Russia using AI. And what was different about what they said was a little bit where they actually broke down TTPs. And this will be in the show notes, but I'll run through these techniques that they're seeing today. So there's reconnaissance, enhanced scripting techniques, aided development as far as software development, malware there, social engineering, which is probably the captain obvious of them all, is that this is just going to be a game changer for social. I mean, we're already doing social engineering at scale anyway before there was even AI. Assisted vulnerability research, payload crafting, enhanced anomaly detection and evasion. Let's see, security feature bypass, and then the final one that they had was resource development. Now they were a little bit light on what they observed in these 3 threat groups and where. Now, if you want to make a joke about Microsoft, you could say Microsoft's been a little light on vulnerability and exploit activity for quite some time. In general, take your gut punch onto Microsoft there a little bit. But I did like it that they broke out these specific TTPs. And I think it gives this is a nation state. Of course, this is what we're seeing, right? So this is the cream of the crop. They have motivation, they have intent, and they have capabilities. And you contrast that with cyber criminals. And now what I can tell you from going out in day job, I'm involved in English and Russian language forums. Right now you have Fraud GPT, Worm GPT. So you've got these GPTs that let's call them unlocked, LLMs that are unlocked that you can take the training wheels off and do your evilness with. There's a lot of chatter on the forums where people are like, I want to buy this. And some of the subscriptions are like $400 a month. So it costs more than what my ChatGPT subscription cost.
So hold on a second. When you say they're unlocked in the sense that they have no morals and ethics, that morals and ethics has been removed. So they'll literally attempt global thermonuclear war, to go back to my war games days.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the concept.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Now I don't trust the I think is important. In fact, the other piece that I wanted to bring up, and we'll put this in the show notes as well, is that the NCSC, which is a UK government agency, they work with the National Crime Agency as well. Actually, they kind of broke it out. The NCSC's perspective, and I agree with that, is they basically say for the next 2 years, they forecasted out the next 2 years that techniques are going to complement existing TTPs today. And that's the primary use case for AI. Once you get past 2025, you start to see maybe some more advanced type of stuff. But today it's going to be, and it lines up with what Microsoft said, right? A lot of that was, I mean, it's basically the co-pilot, right? This is your co-pilot for bad things. But the way that the NCSC broke it down is they broke it down into, they have a cool table. They broke it down into 3 categories. They had highly capable state actors, capable state actors, this is group 2, capable actors, commercial companies, and organized crime. And then they had kind of the bottom feeder. So the less capable, the newbies and stuff like that. And then they broke down each area, like capability, reconnaissance, social engineering, tools, lateral movement, exfiltration. And then they basically said, this is a major uplift, this is a neutral, or this is a minor uplift. So it's a pretty cool table to talk about how these different groups are going to do it. But I think today, in the near term, AI is a force multiplier for the threat actors. It's going to enable them to work harder, smarter, faster, and they'll take advantage of it. Nation states is a whole different level. Like if you're going up against the NSA, and the NSA's got, and certainly they no doubt do, have their own models, they're going to be doing something quite different than what we're seeing in the traditional cyber criminal underground.
So coming from a guy who doesn't understand your world, like I don't live in the threat world. That's not where I've resided. I've lived in the vuln world before, but that's actually very different than the threat world. For those in the audience that may not live in that world, are there drastic differences in the operationalization of AI between nation state and the operationalization? I'll murder that word.
Say that again.
Yeah. Okay. I'll say it again for you. That word of a ransomware group, right? Is there a drastic difference in what's happening in the AI between those two?
Well, I would just say there's a drastic difference in capabilities. Swap out AI for whatever you want. Like think back to Stuxnet. Stuxnet is an example of what a nation state that has, like when you talk about adversaries, you do talk about like intent and capabilities. A lot of adversaries have intent, but they have no capability to deliver anything. You think about Stuxnet, a collab between Israel and the United States, right? And what that was able to do. Now imagine them applying the same kind of resources to AI and what you could do there. Now, if you think about where I think in particular for China, with respect to LLMs, China has been stealing data from the West, forever, for decades. I was in the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management breach for the U.S. intelligence community, and you would imagine that they're just building together these large models with all the data that they've stolen, and now you're going to have like a queryable. Look at the training set, essentially, that someone is doing identity theft and IP theft on the level that China does, and what you could start asking of those LLMs, which certainly they have.
So are we actually seeing? You mentioned Worm GPT and Fraud GPT. I don't know much about those actual capabilities. As I'm starting to read and hear a lot more about agents and these autonomous agents that will use GPT based backends to create workflows or execute workflows or take multi-step processes, break an action down into multiple steps, and then execute these multiple steps over time. Are we going to see a fully AI backed adversary where they just say, Rick Holland, target that bald headed dude, go get him, and then the bots go and make it happen? Is that the long term direction here?
I mean, I would think probably even in the short term for some of the stuff, like the open source component, querying, building out a target package, like you wanted to build a target package to fish Rick Holland. I mean, I feel like that's that kind of technology you could do today.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was when we first saw ChatGPT, that I think that was one of the concerns, and we started seeing people putting together their offline versions with the safeties removed. Is even if you just took the typical ransomware operation, which looks a lot like a mediocre pen test, right? And you take the last, it does, right?
It does.
I like that line.
It does.
That's a good
which
one.
makes it kind of depressing because I mean, like mediocre pen test, take it in, right? But yeah, and you take the last few pieces that aren't already automated, and all of a sudden, instead of doing one a month, if you can do 12 a month, like that's not like a huge innovation in terms of, like, it's still ransomware, it's still mediocre, but all of a sudden, all that low hanging fruit that there just weren't enough bad guys to take advantage of. Now, all of a sudden, that was our big concern when ChatGPT first came out, and we started looking at what you could do with it. Is that we called it a labor shortage on the criminal side, right? Solve the criminal labor shortage problem. That's what we were concerned about.
It's another example of like the bar getting lower for attackers, and it just makes it the defender's job. That's why I'm hopeful that as cybersecurity vendors get to realize their vision for AI for the blue side, that maybe it will give us an opportunity to keep up with the bad guys. Although I still contend that's further out than Palo Alto believes.
And here you are saying you're not sure Palo's going to succeed, but the bad guys, you're all about them succeeding. What makes you think that the bad guys are better at AI than the good guys?
I just think the bad guys are better at taking advantage of technical debt than we are of retiring technical debt.
Ooh, that could be the quote of the show. Katie, anything you want to add to this convo?
Can't follow that up.
It's a rarity that we can't follow up commentary that comes out of Rick, but in this particular
that's a very
case,
low bar.
I mean, but that's it's just true. They're really good at taking advantage of opportunity, whereas once you put ethics into it, there's so many questions and there's so many processes, and everybody needs to sign off on this and everybody needs to agree on that. Bad guys don't care. They don't need to agree. They just do.
Well, I mean, look at how China became dominant in manufacturing. They built entire cities that were just manufacturing cities, and the factories that made different components were right next door to each other. To take out friction, to take out logistics. The government was willing to cut red tape and allow things to happen faster. So it became difficult to compete with a country that had all this labor to throw at it, and was willing to take all these shortcuts when others weren't. And I think criminal not to, I guess I am comparing China to criminal organizations, but in the same manner, they're able to cut out friction, and they don't have shareholders. They all kinds of things that slow down legitimate companies aren't going to slow down these criminal organizations, or at least as much.
I have a sad joke that's like when seconds count, change control approval is weeks away. And that's kind of the paradigm that I feel like defenders are in, are always waiting for something. Or thank God I'm a consultant now and not a practitioner and have to deal with the long tail and bureaucracy. You lose staff when you needed to recruit somebody to be able to do this, and you lost the headcount or you lost the budget and things along those lines. There's just a lot that defenders have stacked against them in their day jobs.
So I'm going to throw logs onto the AI fire here. And I want to talk a little bit about an article that we covered on Feb 9, 29, about an elaborate spear phishing campaign using deepfakes. So essentially, the TLDR on this article was that in Hong Kong, and a criminal organization of some sort targeted a deep fake where it's the very traditional, hey, I'm the CEO of the company, please send me money. I need money for XYZ, or, you often see it as gift cards now, right? That everybody laughs, but it wasn't just the text message that said, send me gift cards, or I need you to transfer some money. I'm in a meeting and can't get out. They actually did a deep fake of the entire executive team, a deep fake video of the entire executive team, where they called the finance person onto the line and essentially said, hey, we have this issue. The entire e-staff is here. We're talking through the problem. We need you to wire money to these accounts. And I forget, $25 million was siphoned out of this
25.
company in a matter of days. The CFO, quote CFO, the virtual fake CFO, contacted the targeted employee, asked them to join an executive leadership team meeting. And the entire team was on the call, and not a single one of them was human. And this person fell for it, siphoned off $25 million in a deep fake phishing attack. And then 6 days later, Sora was released. Sora is the new text to video, essentially text to video AI system where you can describe a scene and it makes a very, very realistic, lifelike version of that scene. Now, I don't think you can contact, Sora and say, please give me a lifelike video of Rick Holland talking to Adrian Sanabria and expect to get good results. But the quality is there. The quality is coming, and it's only a matter of time before we can see this used. Do we think this will have any impact on, criminal AI activity or AI-backed criminal style activity in the future? Or is this just hey, this is kind of an interesting, novel one-time attack? Rick?
I'd say it's the new normal is what it feels like there. I mean, on that individual, the fact that there was multiple deep fakes on the video, that person did 15 different transactions as well to wire all of that money out. We've already seen in elections, was it in Slovakia? Was it Slovenia? There was a candidate that had to withdraw because of a deep fake. We're coming up on election season in the United States as well. So I think this just continues. Even I saw the Biden administration. Actually, you mentioned two areas, Tyler. You mentioned one is like protecting the models themselves. The Biden administration has done some executive order and they're starting to work on that area. But they specifically said after this deep fake of Biden doing robocalls came out, that they were going to start on videos watermarking them. But I think the detection technology is probably not on par with where the quote unquote offensive or the negative dual use capabilities of the tech is.
So did they ever catch the person who did the Biden robocalls?
I believe they found an address of someone. It may have been here in Texas where I'm at. I can't remember. But I'm not up on the story.
Everything's bigger in Texas. Go ahead, Adrian. You had a comment?
Yeah. So the first company I saw doing AI, LLM style generative AI detection was giving it away for free. And I was like, oh, cool. Like this is a free technology you can use to detect if something was written by AI. And I was like, how are they monetizing this? And the paid product was to change the written text so that it could no longer be detected as written by AI. And I was like,
facepalm.
Yeah, it was depressing.
So, all right, let's take another vote here. Do we think we're going to see video spear phishing become the norm in 2024, or is it going to be 2025 and later before we see this with frequency? Rick, yes or no? Is it going to be the norm in 2024?
No.
Adrian?
Well, are we specifically talking video?
Yep, video-based spear phishing in 2024 or this year. Is it become the norm? Do we see it more often, or is this a one-time affair?
I'm going to say, yeah, it's going to become the norm.
Ooh, all right. Katie?
I'm going to say no, not the norm. We will see it, but not the norm because they have other things that are easier.
Bingo. I don't think we see it again in 2024. I think this was a proof of concept to see if it would work. It did. I think you'll see it in the political sphere, but I don't believe that you'll see it in the direct siphoning money sphere because it's just too easy to do it some other ways. I think they're going to focus their research on other AI-based approaches to cyber as opposed to video. But hey, we'll see how that takes us.
We'll see when Sora actually gets released to the public and how that drives and changes things as well, versus just the kind of the demo videos that we've seen. But yeah, 2025, 2026, that could be a different story, but not for 2024.
Yep. I definitely think we'll see some deepfake Trumps and Bidens and others later this year saying things they're not supposed to say, but wasn't the question at hand. So I want to slide on to topic number 3 for the day, and our own Katie has going to be leading this conversation for us. She wrote, you wrote a piece on this, right, Katie, or did you just have some commentary on the piece that Ross had written?
Yeah, it's just the piece that that Ross had written. So for context, one of the other subtexts that I read pretty religiously, and again, I'm going to get his name wrong, and I really wish he would hit me up and make sure I'm saying it right. Ross Hallelujah. Okay, good. So his piece is "Trust No One: Why We Can't Trust Most Stats about the cybersecurity industry and why we must stop creating numbers out of thin air." So for anybody who didn't have a chance to read it, it's all about these numbers that get thrown around in cybersecurity. We all read pieces with tons of statistics in air quotes. And it's really hard to say where they came from a lot of times, or if we can get the data behind these statistics, these proclamations, it's through a lens. I don't want to call them phony. I don't want to call them fake. But what Ross says in his piece is, what's that?
I will.
Adrian will call them fake.
All right.
I like it. Take a stance, Adrian. Go ahead, Katie.
So his piece is about why it's so hard to find reliable sources of information about security and why we should not be creating data out of thin air and where we should go from here. So he goes on to say, to unravel what's happening with these and many other stats and whether they can be trusted at all, he looks into various groups, starting with industry analyst firms. So there's been a lot of talk lately about, are industry analysts pay to play? Is it the death of industry analyst firms? Why nobody's going to ever use an analyst again? And first of all, that's garbage. I work for a vendor. I can tell you right now, the last thing vendors want to do is give up their analyst relationships. But analysts aren't the be-all, end-all. They have a specific role. They have specific goals for their role. They very inherently have conflicts of interest because of the model. And that doesn't make them bad. When we say conflict of interest, it doesn't mean this is evil or malicious or anybody's trying to dupe anyone else. It just means that there are different things that they have to do inside of their day jobs that inherently make it hard to get pure play data. So that's industry analysts. He talks about training providers, the training organizations that a lot of us have taken classes from. Those are great. Everybody should educate themselves however they can. And these training organizations also use their members or their class attendees to get data, but it's a very narrow group. It's not a particularly wide group. It's a group of people who are specifically looking for certain types of training. Then he looks at independent writers, bloggers, quote, thought leaders, evangelists, including those of us on this podcast who may have opinions and may state them as fact sometimes, even when we probably shouldn't. Data aggregators, media companies, who in my opinion are some of the worst. I'm not talking about some of the cybersecurity industry media companies necessarily here. I'm talking about more mainstream media that love to post sensationalist type articles, especially when it comes to cybersecurity, because you can always villainize a nation state that isn't the US, right? And then Ross really gets into these various groups and what he says, groups. And at the end, what he writes is, the challenge is that cybersecurity industry has set a very low standard of what can be considered research, and we aren't taking any numbers we see at face, and we are taking numbers we see at face value. And I think this is a really good, it doesn't necessarily answer the question. So if you're going to go and read this article and be like, Ross has all the answers, that's not what he's trying to do here. He's trying to get us all to think about, what are we seeing? And should we be taking everything we read as the gospel? And I think it's not only these sources that he quotes here, because there are a lot of them in this article, but there are other factors at play here, like social media. Everybody in the world has a platform to say what they want, to write what they want. Misinformation.
Yeah, look at the Cyberbowl. The barrier to entry is so low here.
The barrier to entry is so low, and there have been actual studies on how misinformation and disinformation spread wider and faster, quicker, because people love that. And frankly, people don't want or need to check their sources anymore. They can just say, hey, that's what I heard. I heard it from a guy, right? And
so Katie, what do we recommend? What do we recommend to the audience member who sees a stat that says, 70% of X is X, or we've researched, asked 1,000 companies and 37% of them said Y? What do you do? How do you debunk this? How do you, as a reader or as a general CISO, should you just assume that everything is bullshit straight out of the box?
No, because that makes you a cynic, Tyler. And yes, that was a double entendre.
Okay, all right.
So yes and no. The reality is, when you see data from anywhere, if you can get the raw data, awesome. Most people don't care about raw data. I like it. It's fun. But if you're not that kind of person, you don't necessarily have to say, hey, this is wrong, but you have to understand the context. You have to understand the background. You have to say, this media company has this particular interest. That's why we're pushing this. Or this vendor company, if they're a CrowdStrike, for instance, and they're talking about endpoint vulnerabilities, and they've surveyed people on endpoint vulnerabilities, and a lot of people are their customers. So CrowdStrike's not doing anything wrong, but they have a control group that is biased or has a predisposition towards thinking and doing things a certain way. Again, that doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make them liars, but you have to look at this data with a skew, and you have to understand that most data is or can be manipulated. I'm going to say it straight out. I've written lots of reports based on data, and I've manipulated that data to say what the company who's hired me to write a report isn't, what's in their best interest.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks. Katie is a fakist. She's a data manipulator. You heard it here. She admitted it. We can chalk this up. The reality is, we all have, right? And I think Adrian said it right away. Adrian, what is your thoughts on this? You put a couple of things in the show notes there. How do you go about debunking this kind of content?
Yeah, so I think part of the problem is you have a lot of marketing folks, that are in charge of putting this stuff together that don't necessarily have like a journalist background or, a data analyst background, and they're faced with, you find a good quote, you go and use it. And there's an organization, Cybersecurity Ventures in cybersecurity, that specializes in coming up with fake stats, that people absolutely love and use widely. So Steve Morgan and his company, Cybersecurity Ventures, is notorious for doing this. And a very clever way of doing it, using circular references where they will post things on Forbes and on op-eds on other websites and reference those from Cybersecurity Ventures, and then use Cybercrime Magazine and other names that they have to create this circular series of references to make it sound like their work has been well referenced. You'll never find a methodology. You'll never find a reference that's not them referencing themselves. And so it's one of these things where you kind of feel like you're going crazy when you try and debunk it or do some due diligence on it, because you find yourself going in circles. But a lot of this stuff is really easy to debunk. And some of it is just purely accidental, is because somebody didn't know what they were doing. So quick story. I was at Black Hat one year, and Cylance was showing a stat. They were giving a live presentation in the expo area to an audience. And they had a Verizon DBIR stat shown up there, and they were saying this stat shows that malware is used in 95% of breaches. And what happened is they assumed the x-axis went to 100%. The x-axis went to 33%. So it was actually 31% that of malware used or found in breaches in the Verizon data. And for that reason, Verizon says, check with us before using this stuff, and we can help you. Like, they're fantastic. Sometimes I would just hit somebody up in DMs on Twitter, and they get back to me in like 15, 20 minutes with a custom query and a custom graph on a piece of data that I asked about. So it's pretty easy to check your stats and make sure there are people out there who will help you use them correctly if you're using somebody else's data. But yeah, a lot of people just, the stat looks great, the graph looks great, and they just copy and paste it and go with it.
So I think the moral of the story is, first of all, go read Ross's article. He's got a book out too. I highly recommend picking up his book. It's a must read. And then remember, 95% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So we'll end with my stat there, and we'll hop on to the next story, which is Canada banning the Flipper Zero. So, we put this story into the CyberWhy newsletter a while back within the last couple of weeks. People had been using the Flipper Zero, which Adrian will talk a little bit about the capabilities of the Flipper Zero for us, but they've been using the Flipper Zero to capture and unlock codes for cars, and then breaking into the cars, remotely starting them, breaking into the cars and stealing cars in Canada. And so Canada banned the Flipper Zero from the country. So they banned a technology, and immediately I flashed back to Back Orifice 2000 release in 1999, and the media was all the same. We have to ban remote access software because it's horrible and it causes issues, and you can remote control people's computers. And is this a scenario of banning a tool as opposed to banning an activity of doing something illegal? Definitely what it ended up being with regard to Back Orifice 2000 back in the day when I actually had more color in my hair, or had hair for that matter. I'll jump on that one before Rick makes the hair joke. But yeah, at the end of the day, does this make any sense to stop importation of this tool to Canada? It's almost like saying, hey, we're not going to allow crowbars in Canada because you can use them to kill somebody. Seems ridiculous to me. Adrian, do you have a little Flipper Zero there? Can you show the audience what it looks like and maybe talk a little bit about the capabilities on it on a basic level?
Yeah. So
before you do that, Canada just banned Tyler from ever entering again. So
no way. They're sorry. They're not gonna. I'll put my toque on. They'll let me back in.
It has nothing to do with the skills, though. It's just the lack of hair. It's entirely based on that.
100%.
I mean, if you try and correlate banned books with bestsellers, if you've ever done that join on those two different databases, yeah, I mean, banning something, like the Flipper Zero, which I've got one here, is a great way to make it a bestseller. We know it doesn't work. We know from hindsight that all you're going to do is attract additional attention to it. This thing, the software on it, the hardware it's built with is all open source. So people can, just get the raw components and build their own, so you'll have, Maple Zero or something like that. Canada will just some aspiring entrepreneur will just create their own version.
And I just love the fact that you called it Maple Zero, which is very Canadian of you, right? To represent the Canadian, the Maple Leafs, and all the maple references.
Of course.
Up there.
And a lot of the capabilities of this, 100% of this you can do with a laptop with the right accessories to plug into your laptop. You can do it with an Android phone with the right accessories. This is not the only device that can do this. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of devices that have the same capabilities. They were stealing cars using laptops, and software on laptops. Are you going to ban Linux? Are you going to ban Kali? Now pen testers can't bring tools with them. Kind of reminds me of back with Wassenaar, we saw a situation where Even port scanners were potentially going to be illegal under that agreement.
You should probably level set on what that Wassenaar agreement was, because I imagine some listeners aren't familiar.
Yeah. So actually, you probably know more about it than I do. I know just enough to get into trouble with both the Flipper Zero and talking about Wassenaar. So I'm on the very edge of revealing how little I know about this stuff.
Well, just what tools would be legal and illegal, right? It's the dual use type of thing. Right. So, the tools that we as blue teamers or white hats use could potentially be illegal for export. And it was a pretty big deal. So, but I think it is like tackling the dual use challenge that you have.
And that was the encryption component too, right? It was using encryption, therefore it was illegal, many tools back in that era.
That wasn't Wassenaar. Like that was our export restrictions back in the day.
Right, which is a whole other stupid thing.
Like in the PlayStation 2,
we said we weren't going to.
There were export controls on the PlayStation 2 because it had too much compute power, right? Like we were afraid Iran was going to use them, in guided missiles or something like that. When guided missiles were using ancient technology that you could find in a BlackBerry pager. None of it made any sense. It's all just political posturing. It's not based on any kind of factual evidence or studies or anything like that. It's just a knee-jerk response that we see.
Yeah. So apparently we're doomed to make the same mistakes we've always made from the Wassenaar era to the export restrictions of crypto to the back orifice 2K release, and now again at Flipper Zero. So to quote Adrian, one of his more famous sayings is, "This is going to end up being a whole lot of a nothing burger."
Yeah, and it's just, it's a political thing, right? It looks worse to do nothing when nothing is the correct thing to do, so you do something. They prefer to do something even though something is the wrong thing, because it looks, inaction looks worse, I guess.
So kind of jumping on the do nothing is the wrong things question, I'm going to jump to our next topic. And the question here that I have for the folks on this call, on this pod, did you all see the Super Bowl? Question number one. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Saw the halftime.
Saw the halftime. Adrian saw the halftime.
Yeah.
Even better, did you see the CrowdStrike advertisement?
You'll have to remind me. I'm pretty sure I did, but I forget.
Okay.
Oh, you've got a link in here. I'll just look at the link.
I do have a link in there. I highly recommend you go. If you haven't seen the CrowdStrike advertisement from the Super Bowl, definitely go take a look at it. It is something else. And I began immediately thinking, how much money did it cost to actually run the Super Bowl ad? And I found on Reddit, and we'll bring this up on the live or on the feed so that you guys can see the screenshot here. Sean, our super producer, will bring it up. What is the cost of a 30-second TV ad during the Super Bowl? It is this year, actually. Yeah, I believe for 2023 it was over $7.5 million for a 30-second ad. So 30-second ad, $7.5 million. So CrowdStrike, presumably, I don't know this for a fact, but presumably paid $7.5 million. Or more to run an advertisement that they did, which was a Wild West themed combo platter.
It made me think of Westworld. That's what I was like, what is this? Yeah. Westworld?
So literally was just
Are we getting the final season of Westworld that they canceled on us, or what?
Yes, exactly. So
until I was disappointed to find out it was CrowdStrike.
It was Wild West sci-fi meets Mandalorian with weird robots. Okay, so immediately I was like, that's got to be a waste of money. That's never going to work. But then I started doing a little bit of research, and I asked ChatGPT, as one does now, because ChatGPT knows everything, what makes a Super Bowl ad worth doing? And it brought up some interesting points to me. It said the most important things about a Super Bowl ad is really about your brand recognition longer term. It's not necessarily to try to sell anything. It's about trying to get people to remember that it's CrowdStrike, right? In this particular case. And we're all remembering it. We're all still talking about it a couple of weeks later. It could have a longer life than even the couple of weeks that we're talking about it. But the key things that ChatGPT recommended was, look, when you're breaking down the success of a advertisement on the Super Bowl, how viral is it? How viral did it go? Well, immediately the next day, everybody was talking about the CrowdStrike ad. It was all over Twitter, all over LinkedIn, all over social media. So the virality, it's not the virility, it's the virality of it is actually quite high. The emotional roller coaster that it puts you on. Yeah. Okay, Katie, we don't need any smart comments. Roll your eyes and leave me alone for a minute. Emotional roller coaster. Does it put you on an emotional roller coaster? And the best SuperBowl ads take viewers on a journey. They don't just say, here's our logo, right? Because it doesn't get stuck in the brain. I don't know about y'all, but when I saw this, I immediately had an emotional reaction. I wouldn't necessarily equate it to this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, but hey, there was an emotional roller coaster attached to it. Brand recall. We're all remembering CrowdStrike as the attached brand. It was enough of a connection. Now, outside of cyber circles, my concern is, would the brand recognition have been connected? Maybe, maybe not. For us, it's very clear because you immediately go, did you see the CrowdStrike ad, right? I don't know if it would have worked outside of cyber circles, but hey, they're targeting cyber buyers. So, all right, maybe there is brand recall there. Innovation and creativity. It was certainly creative. It gets 4 or 5 out of 5 stars for innovation and creativity. It was interesting. It was different. And then really what it comes down to is, the ROI. Is there going to be an ROI on this advertisement? And so when you think of those 4 or 5 different grades, I give it 4 or 5 stars out of every grade. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, you know what? It worked. It worked for me.
So let's talk about the numbers. So, if you're Geico and you run a SuperBowl ad, what percentage of the audience are potential customers, are within your ICP, versus CrowdStrike, which is B2B, not a B2C product. As far as I know, they don't have a product that consumers would buy. They're only B2B.
Correct.
So what is your cost per impression, or whatever you would use it in marketing terms for CrowdStrike versus something like Geico or Subway or something that you're marketing to every viewer of the SuperBowl, not just the handful of I can't imagine how many security folks are seeing that, but maybe it's worth it for them. I don't know.
Well, disconnected, Adrian, right? Disconnected to the SuperBowl and talk about how many people spoke about it the next day. They may not have seen it live, but you could get all this on YouTube, which definitely go and load it up on YouTube and take a look. We'll figure out a way to put the link and make it available on the pod as well, or within the CyberWise website or something. We'll make it available to you. But the next day, everybody in cyber was talking about it. Literally everybody knows what we're talking about when you bring it up. So maybe it was just an ends to the mean to get to your ICP.
Are you sure about that? That everybody in cyber was talking about the next day? We were texting about it for about 15 minutes, and then we were
So here, let's back up to the numbers a bit, because Adrian brings up a really, really good point. Like, okay, your audience for car insurance, home insurance, life insurance, a very, very high percentage of SuperBowl watchers, right? Your audience for buying a cybersecurity product, much, much smaller. What's the average cost of home and owner's insurance, of car insurance per capita, right? Versus what are you going to spend on a cybersecurity product? That's a lot more. I'm not going to spend the same amount on my homeowner's insurance that any of these vendors is charging for their product. So there's that. You're also going with the homepage of the Wall Street Journal, again, in air quotes effect, which is some executive, some board member at some company, end user company, enterprise organization goes, oh, shoot, my competitor was just breached. I saw this really cool ad. Hey, I'm going to go to my CISO tomorrow and say, what about this tool? So there are a lot of different goals from a marketing point of view that you have to consider when it comes to advertising, branding, marketing. It's not all about that direct hit. It's not all about that immediate sale. This is a pipeline effect. You have to take your potential buyer on a journey. And there is a much longer tail when you look at something like a SuperBowl ad. Now, I can say I live in the Boston area. They've been advertising on billboards here for a decade, right? I drive up and down the highway and I'm like, what the hell are they doing? And for a long time, I didn't get it. But the reality is, first of all, who are some of the bigger advertisers in the world? Coca-Cola, McDonald's, companies we all know.
B2C.
You'd be like, why do they have to
that
advertise?
are already successful. Yeah.
Because
And B2C.
that is part of the reason they're successful, because they keep doing it. That brand recognition, that recall, it gets faster, it gets into the nomenclature. You start to verb a company, right? And
also this is a public company, right? So it's they're not just looking for buyers, they're potentially looking for investors also, right? Which
exactly.
could be
So it's this
in
recall,
a consumer
this
investing market,
continuous, let's get in front of them. They don't understand it now. Maybe by the seventh time they see it, they'll go check it out. And when they see it, maybe they know somebody in their business who might need some. So it's a very different approach to marketing. When you're in a marketing organization, when you're in a sales organization, when you're the CEO of a vendor company, you're like, where is my ROI? I want that advertisement to lead to a sale. Well, when you do this kind of branding, you can only be a certain kind of company. You can't be a startup and be spending $7 million on one campaign.
Yeah, you better not be.
Well, you can. All right, let me change it.
Long gone.
You can.
Your runway is going to get short.
IPO or get acquired, but you can. But you have to be playing the long game. And you can measure brand recognition just like you can measure sales. It's a different metric. There are different goals and objectives. You have to look at who your company is, what your company is, and what its goals are. But it is a measurable type of campaign. It's just a different process. Hitting different people at different times works.
I think you're bringing up really, really good points. Adrian just posted into our back channel Slack something that I think we can pop up on the screen. It's a Gartner Magic Quadrant. If we can legally pop it up on the screen, we will legally pop it up on the screen. If we are not allowed to share a Gartner Magic
I'm sure you're not allowed to. You got to license that, brother.
Yeah. I'm
you know
not
how analyst game works.
Yeah, exactly. We're all former analysts. We know how it works. But
it's Tyler's
he did
podcast.
send out
CrowdStrike.
Yeah, CrowdStrike is in the top right for the Magic Quadrant for endpoint protection platforms, which says to me their brand recognition is pretty high. And is this a game of, hey, we already are hitting it out of the park. We have plenty of money to do brand advertising. And Katie, I want to double click on something else with you before we leave this topic. In the era of cyber marketing, where email doesn't work as cleanly as it once did because everybody's flooded with email, are we switching to a more brand-centric marketing funnel going forward? And if that is the case, does that lend more credence to the need for a SuperBowl ad?
100%. Because are you the emails that I see on my company's Slack channel for people who are targeted as quote unquote buyers, it's to make fun of people sending emails, right? Nobody picks up their phone. When is the last time you picked up your phone from an unknown number or even from a number you know? I screen out calls from people all the time.
Tyler calls me all the time and I'm like straight to voicemail.
Exactly. So yeah, and let's face it, if you work in cybersecurity and you don't know CrowdStrike, you might want to question your life choices, right? So they don't need to target those people. They need to target the people who are going to go nag the people with the budget.
So it is a mass market play, is what Katie's saying. Super great debate on that. We also just got a copy of the Forrester Wave for Cloud Workload Security Q1 2024 put in the Slack, and guess who's in the leaders section? Palo Alto Networks and CrowdStrike, the two companies that were debating the efficacy of their strategies. And you know what? At the end of the day, it seems to be working. They're both massively publicly traded companies. They have massive brand impact. I'm not putting it past CrowdStrike to be highly successful with this weird Westworld advertisement.
I'm calling for 2024 SuperBowl to do a cybersecurity grudge match commercial between Palo and CrowdStrike.
You heard it here first, folks. Next year at the SuperBowl, I want to see who can have the best cyber ad, Palo or CrowdStrike. I think that's going to be a good battle to have. So with that, we're going to move to the next topic. We have time for two more topics. We have time for one more meaty topic, and then we're going to get to the fun topic at the end of the day. This one's one that Adrian has followed fairly closely with me. We've actually debated it and discussed it on some other shows In today's market, in today's cybersecurity startup world, now we're going back to the startups, not the publicly traded companies. In light of, there's an ongoing debate of bootstrap cyber companies, efficient cybersecurity companies, and high growth, high spend, burn at all costs, capture the market strategies, right? We can say Wiz is a successful high growth, burn at all costs, run the whole market overplay. And then we can actually put Thinkist. I think it's called Thinkist, right, Adrian?
You got it.
Yeah, they make Thinkist Canary, which is a
deception.
Thank you, deception technology. And Haroon Mir is the very well-known founder of that company, and he bootstrapped that company for the longest time. I'm not sure if it's still bootstrapped, but it certainly ran a long time as a bootstrapped company. And and again, we go back to Ross, who is a very prolific analyst and writer, had a bit of a discussion about whether you could be successful in bootstrapping a company in today's market. And so I want to put it out there and talk about the differences and debate the differences between a bootstrapped versus a high growth strategy here. Obviously, it's hard to do high growth now when your venture capital has dried up. So I don't know that even the high growth play is possible right now. But is it possible, do you think, Adrian, to build a successful cyber company to the size of a publicly traded exit? I mean, yes, it's going to be possible to build one to 1 million, 5 million in ARR, but can you bootstrap a company to IPO? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but would you want to? I'm not sure if you'd want to grow it that big, that fast. So yeah, I think Trend Micro is mostly bootstrapped. Kaspersky, I think, is still a private company. Of course, these are companies that are in other markets. If Trend Micro is public, they're going to be public in Japan. But and sometimes these companies will grab capital later in life. So if you look at Bishop Fox, they were mostly a bootstrapped services company, pen testing company, providing security services that decided to take some money from ForgePoint.
Run Zero, HD's company. He was bootstrapped for the longest time and only recently took in, I think, his first round after bootstrapping that company for quite some time as well.
Yeah, and it's so you have to be very strategic about it, though. Product strategy has to be on point. It has to be a product that's product has to sell itself, right? The value prop has to be very easy to demonstrate. So the best thing to do with a Thinks Canary is have somebody do a proof of concept right before a pen test team hits them, because it's going to catch them every time, in every case that I've ever seen. And same thing with Gray Noise. Similar thing there. It was bootstrapped for a while. Finally took some capital there. But these are projects where. And Thinks made a hardware product, right? They were shipping physical hardware. Yes, it was, they didn't build the hardware from the ground up. It is based on a Raspberry Pi. And that sounds a little hacky, but then you look at the news and you see Pulse Secure was using an 11-year-old version of CentOS in a production product. And the truth of the matter is, the companies, any company out there, they're all doing hacky stuff. You're just not necessarily seeing all of it, but it works, and they've just put a ton of, not every company's willing to put the time and effort into polishing a product to that point. So I think that's a key point you see with bootstrap companies is the product is proven. The product is really high quality and well polished. Oftentimes there's like a freemium model to it, which if you're going to have a freemium model, it's got to be well polished or you'll get just absolutely destroyed. There will be reviews out there talking about what a terrible product it is. The average consumer that goes out and tries a product, $1 app in an app store, just absolutely relentless. Like they'll tell you exactly what they think. Whereas, something you're paying $1 million for, for a large Fortune 1000 company, you can't find any reviews of it anywhere, and it can be complete garbage. You don't know. You just end up doing a proof of concept and you find out the hard way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think blitz scaling. It's funny. I teach at the University of North Carolina Business School. I teach growing a high growth startup. It's one of the classes that they offer to the MBA program there, and I'm the professor. And I had to do my lecture on blitz scaling the other day, and I really struggled to give that lecture as even a valid business model anymore, because blitz scaling doesn't work in the current macro climate, in the current VC climate, in a it takes so much money to run over a market that doesn't even make sense anymore.
Maybe you blitz scale when you're going to give your services away and you have a quote unquote platform that you want to grow and you take some hits right now for future growth.
Yeah, that's the public market version. Come on, that's Palo through and through. It's the smart play from Palo, but I think it's a bad play from any individual cyber company right now, because who are you going to go up against if you win? Palo. You're going to get stomped.
Yeah, I mean, your first couple of customers have to be big. They have to be design partners. They have to be patient with you. If you're going to bootstrap stuff, you can't have small like 3, 4, 5 digit deal sizes for your first couple of customers if you're bootstrapping, or you've got to be massively well self-funded, right? Somebody who did like $100 million exit, and a founder who took home a huge chunk of that, and they're basically their own VC at that point.
And you need a referenceable customer, which is really, really hard to do, even if you put it in your contract.
Well, or like if you have a Haroon Mir, he has a personal network. He's well trusted. I think, it's tough to do a bootstrap company like that without a Haroon. So a lot of these bootstrap companies you see, the founders are well known, well trusted, from other stuff that they've done. And it's going to take a while for them to exhaust their networks before they have to cross the chasm.
It's interesting you bring that up. The last thing I want to wrap up on this particular topic, let's talk about Andrew Morris from Grey Noise. He was not extremely well known when he started Grey Noise, but he became well known. And he did a phenomenal job of creating a personal brand, a personal culture that people connected with. And he really represented bootstrapping. He really represented self-made marketing. He really represented, I'm going to scale this thing in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. And people hooked onto that. Many people, and he had a product that was great too, right? Obviously you have to have that, but he did create a great culture and personal brand that wrapped around the business. He sends out his Grey Noise newsletter, and it starts with just him in a video talking, and it's just totally transparent and open, and here's where we are and here's where we're going. It is absolutely fantastic. So I think you can do it if you may not have the personal brand at the start, but you have to figure out the marketing aspect of that along the ride.
And he was directly inspired by Haroon and Thinkst in that, and he, if you look at Thinkst marketing, their marketing and Andrew's marketing, and same thing with Material Security, very similar model. They're just very transparent about what they're doing, so the actual building of the company and the product is the marketing, and that it works really well, again, with certain product types, right? These are products where you can build the MVP very quickly, and you can iterate on it very quickly and build on that. I don't think it works with a SIM. Right. Or maybe it does. Lima Charlie. Maybe Lima Charlie's an example of that.
There's another example.
I maybe chose a bad example there.
All right. We're going to move on to our final topic of the day as we wrap up the show. We like to end our newsletter every week. We call it story number 5. Is a fun story. We try to end our weekly newsletter with a story number 5, we call it. So we'll call this story number 5, even though I don't believe it's the 5th story. Our story number 5 for our first ever podcast is a Instacart recipes using AI, which didn't necessarily turn out so good. So Adrian, as I bring up here in the background some of the images, maybe you can tell us how you found this, what you found here on the story of the Instacart AI recipes.
Yeah, so this is so it's coming from 404 Media, which are a bunch of journalists that I love that came out of Vice Motherboard specifically, most of them, if not all of them. And
also RIP to that whole organization now, based on the news from last week.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that news. What?
Yeah, I haven't either. Rick, what's the news there?
Shutting it all down.
Really?
Vice
like
Media?
motherboard, all of that beat is gone.
Wow.
It happened sometime last week. I saw a bunch of the former motherboard journalists who were great team of folks.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, go ahead, please. Yeah.
So if you need somewhere to go for that kind of news, 404 is great. I'm full disclosure. I pay the subscription for it. It's subscription run. It's just 4 journalists at this point, but they get amazing exclusives. This is more of a funny one, not one of their amazing exclusives, but it's a lot of fun. So this is Instacart trying to use AI to come up with recipes on demand and like tailor them to the people that are looking at them. I haven't actually signed up and tried to get custom ones for me yet, but it's just a case of like nobody really QA'd this. There's no quality control here. They're like, oh, this is a great idea. Program this, throw it on a website, and I feel like nobody actually tested this out. So there's a great example here. Let me find it.
So while he's bringing that up, there's a few interesting titles here. The low carb ground beef.
Yeah.
Low carb ground beef and broccoli stir fry, low carb spaghetti squash pasta, low carb almond pancakes, and as you can see here in this image, chocolate chip watermelon popsicle with chocolate chip. I'm not exactly sure how that would work.
Interesting.
Or vanilla chocolate chip ice cream ball.
Which
the
is
image
purple.
is just
why is your vanilla purple on top?
Yeah, the images are just incredible. Clearly some AI flawed images here. But hey, whatever.
Yeah, and they're not the only one trying this. There's another organization called DishGen, and they asked DishGen to come up with and I'm sure this will get better. This will eventually work. This is just shoddy quality assurance here, quality control. But they asked DishGen to come up with a recipe using the following ingredients: tomatoes, cucumbers, ground beef, onions, lemons, and chocolate. And it provided me a recipe for citrus beef salad that seemed not bad until it got to step 6, when it asked me to sprinkle the shaved chocolate on top as a surprising twist.
It's mole. It's your mole sauce, Adrian. What's wrong with you?
That's not.
We all know your addiction to chocolate, Katie. Come on.
That's not how mole sauce works.
Well, in the Katie world, literally chocolate goes on anything. Let's be real here.
The chocolate is not shaved on top. It's not a mole recipe.
I'm trying to think something chocolate would be bad on fish, maybe.
Oh, all right. We're going to leave you with that thought. Adrian, thank you for the story number 5 this week. From a closing remarks perspective, I want to thank Rick, Katie, and Adrian. Y'all seriously crushed it today. Thank you so much. Rick, thank you for keeping my rants about rogue nation states from spiraling into full-blown paranoia. Katie, you're my constant reality check when I get lost in vendor marketing buzzwords. Thank you very much for protecting me there. And thank you for not throwing a chocolate bar at me today. Adrian, I'm still amazed you haven't stormed off yelling, "Get off my lawn," after my wild cloud security prediction capabilities earlier in the show. Seriously, I can't do it without you guys, this motley crew of cyber experts. They help me week to week create some phenomenal content. I couldn't do it without you guys. And maybe next time we'll try to take the snark down a little bit by 5%, but let's be real, that's not going to happen. Adrian's giving me the thumbs up, snark to the moon. Yeah. And yes, thank you guys so much for coming. And with that, we're going to wrap up our show. So this is the end of the first episode of the Cyber Y Pod, and we'll see you guys next month.